Welcome to this month's Creatrix Conversations. I am overjoyed to have my guest, Elizabeth Dillon, or shall I say Lizzie Moonbeam. Welcome, Lizzie Moonbeam.
I'm so honored and delighted to be here. Hello, Flora Fairy.
Yes, and I'm embodying my alter ego of Flora Fairy today, which has been a long time nickname in my life. And we are both we've just been chatting and giggling and getting ready for this conversation, this Creatrix conversation that we are so delighted to have with you today, talking about connecting with fairies and elementals. So it really is that time of year, I'm just in love with the energy of June as we come into summer, and in the Celtic tradition, this is definitely the season where the fairy sightings are much more prevalent. And of course, we have the Midsummer's Night Dream, that magical play that Shakespeare wrote that really was a result of the long-standing traditions of, and the connection between midsummer and the summer solstice and fairies. And so we're just going to dive in and share about our personal experiences connecting with fairies and elementals, why we love them, and also sharing some ways that you can bring this energy into your life. So yay. Hello, Rachel. I see you on. Great. We have some sisters joining us. And please, if you have any comments or questions for us, I am monitoring the live stream today. So let's start, Lizzie Moonbeam. Let's start with, share when did you first realize that you loved fairies? What's been your relationship with fairies?
I feel like, I think it's been my whole life. And, before Flora and I hopped on, I was telling her that last night I was guided to watch Hook. For those of you who don't know, it's actually a movie with Robin Williams where he's Peter Pan, but he's grown up. So he's grown up and his children get kidnapped by Captain Hook. So he has to go to Neverland to go and save them. And it's this beautiful, I think for me, even as a kid, I think I watched that when I was 3 and 4. It was one of those movies that I'd watch over and over again. Like there is a frequency in it. There was a joy. There was a wonder that my soul was in such deep resonance with. And I think every time I would go, like watch that movie was like going to Neverland for me. And the reason I love that, and it has such a resonance with me, even now that I've grown up, but no one really grows up, is that, Peter Pan actually, it's funny, he's a lawyer. And right. He's completely disconnected from the magic. And I feel like that's the story for so many of us, that we grow up, we get disconnected from the magic that is our essential truth. And so that's why we have, these beautiful stories, fairies, fairy tales that bring us back into that alignment. So anyway, I feel like for me, Peter Pan was a huge window into that reality of wonder and joy. And I think even though I'm much more clairsentient, I feel things and I hear things, I could just feel the energy of Neverland. I could feel the energy of the fairies, always wanting to kind of open my heart and remind me of the bliss, the joy of just being alive. And I feel like that's really the main message that, they have for us today.
Here to that. I'm waving my fairy wand to that. Yeah. And I also love that movie Hook, and I much prefer it to the original Peter Pan made by Disney, because the original is so sexist and racist. And it's like I didn't really fully realize it as a kid, but watching it again as an adult, I was like, no way. So Hook is a much better introduction to that whole world of Neverland. We have a comment I want to acknowledge, our sister Julie, that says that she had her first and only fairy sighting in Zurich. So that's Switzerland. Ooh. I was amazed and taken aback. can't say I had much experience with them before. So that's amazing.
That's very cool.
I love that. You know, the idea of you know, the concept of fairies is really interesting one, because some people take it quite literally, right? That we can see fairies and they exist in our, you know, in our world, but there's really another whole understanding of them being kind of like interdimensional creatures.
Mm-hmm.
That's the camp that I'm in. I don't think that fairies exist entirely in our realm. I think that they weave in and out. And so if you have a sighting, it's like you've managed to catch one that's come in from an interdimensional portal. Lizzie, Lizzie Moonbeam, Lizzie Moonbeam, you mentioned movies, you know, as Peter Pan is one of your portals into this world. Do you remember reading fairy tales as a child?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think for me, I mean, I think I must have watched and read like every fairy tale under the sun. But I think for me it was I'm trying to figure out the words, stories. You know, because my company is Magical Storytelling, and I've started to realize it, like I think that words are the most powerful things in the universe, because
And this is why you're a bardic priestess.
yes, because when we want to, for me, it's like when we hear a story, you know, we can hear a story of a faraway land. And literally, even though our bodies are here, our souls get taken to that place. The words have that special magic to transport us there. And so that's also why, you know, there are a lot of different ways of connecting, you know, with, you know, the fairy. You can go, you know, to kind of on a guided meditation journey in your own mind. But I feel like it's helpful if someone prepares one for you, because it's almost like then you can fully just relax, surrender, and let the words take you away. And the words literally are acting as this magical portal connecting the realms. And, you know, Flora Fairy, you know, I agree with you. I'm of the camp that fairies are interdimensional beings. And the way that I was taught is that they're actually sister realms. And these sister realms used to be much closer together. So at one point, you know, there would be, you know, like you said, a fairy would come through the doorway into our world, and we really would actually have times where we would see them and interact with them and engage with them. But I think that time is more in the past. So that's why for someone to see one nowadays is very rare, very extraordinary. But again, so nowadays, the way that I feel that we can best traverse and bridge the world is the power of words. Yeah. Because for me, like I usually connect telepathically. I connect telepathically with the Fae. So it's, again, the words are bridging the dimensions. The words are bridging the realms. And that's, again, why we have stories, why we have these guided meditations, because the words themselves, they're the force of creation. So I'm just really I think that's part of the message that I want to bring through today, is reminding everyone when we say word magic, it's that words have the power to connect us on a heart level and also to connect the realms.
Ding, ding, ding. Love it. I agree. And I remember being fascinated with and just in love with so many fairy tales. A couple that really stand out to me: East of the Sun, West of the Moon. Oh, I loved that story. And you know, another one that I loved, Tatterhood. You know, in addition to like some of the Grimm's classics, or you know, all of those fairy tales. But I remember as a child, just like you said, just feeling like a telepathic, clairsentient, certainly didn't have the language for that then, but just being out in nature. I was blessed to grow up rurally most often. So not like we had a lot of property, but there was nature around. And I suppose I was also fortunate that I was a kid in the 80s, and there was like, I don't know, it was just like go outside and play. And like, you know, no helicopter parents back in the day. So I would just be climbing trees and like catching frogs in the creek and just being outside and just having this feeling of this extra energy that was there. And yeah, I just, that was my first real connection to them. And it's like I really always wanted to see one. Like I did have that. It was like if I could see one, it would be like the proof of what I was feeling, you know. But it was like only ever like, oh, what was that, out of the corner of my eye.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And in that way they stay in the mystery, which I gotta say I love about them. And I've since learned that in the Irish myth and the legends of Ireland, that when the Tuatha Dé Danann originally came to the island, they were full size. Like they were like a human race that were coming to basically immigrate to Ireland, that as the myth goes. But then as other people came to the land, and other invaders, they chose to become smaller. They chose to become the little people in order to more easily hide and to be able to stay in Ireland unnoticed. And yeah, and the interdimensionality, that's really where that whole concept of between the veils comes from. And those points, the Beltane, Bealtaine, April 30th, and then Samhain, the in that Celtic tradition of understanding that there's something magic at those 2 points on the wheel, that the veils between our worlds is thin. And since we're still in that season right now, it's like, get out in your garden, get out into the woods, spend some time by the lake or the river. There's so many different kinds of fairies too, right?
Yeah, I was just thinking while you were talking about the Tuatha Dé Danann, it reminds me actually also of the Sidhe, which are like the Scottish Gentry fairies.
Yes.
So, and those are also large beings, and they used to walk among us, but then kind of what you're describing with the Tuatha Dé Danann, it's just like with all the things that human beings did, it's like they actually kind of shifted into another dimension, and we can still call upon them, we can still connect with them. But I think that's part of, I think, it's the undercurrent of what we're talking about here. It's that once upon a time, there was this interplay between the interplay is still happening between the realms, but it's much more underground, and I feel like we're here today, trying to bridge, trying to, I think, bridge this chasm and call back the elemental kingdom and call back the fairies, and really, I think, honor them and remember them the way that they deserve to be remembered. And I love movies, but so what's actually kind of coming through now, there was a Merlin movie that came there. I know there's 5,000 Merlin movies, but there is one that came out, forgetting the guy who starred in it was it was Dr. Grant from Jurassic Park.
Okay.
Yes. So he's like an iconic face. I'm forgetting the name right now, but he was Merlin, and Queen Maeve was the villain, and the whole, it was like 3-hour film is like them thwarting each other. And finally at the end, she's like, well, what are you going to do now? And Merlin just turns to her and says, I'm going to forget you. Like, and he literally turns his back on her and walks away, and she's screaming after him, Merlin, Merlin. And it doesn't matter because he won't turn and look at her. And for me, like, when I was a kid, I saw that and I was like, okay, that's a funny ending. And now I realized, oh my God, that's what happened. And so that's why it's so paramount. It's so essential that when Maeve is calling Merlin, or when Maeve is calling to us, that we actually turn and look at her, that we actually, bring our hearts and we open and we remember that this is not just a human kingdom. This is a place where we can connect with water sprites, tree spirits, nymphs. We can connect with so many different beings, and we might not be able to always see them with our eyes, but we can feel them with our hearts and with our higher consciousness.
Yes, that forgetting. right? Whether intentional, right? Like I'm consciously choosing to forget you as like the ultimate punishment.
I know.
Or the great forgetting that we can look at history and we see that happen really time and time again. How many times have we had to like relearn that the earth is round, for example, right? It's like the ancient Greeks knew the planet was round, and then we had to forget that, and then we had to remember it again, and then we had to forget it. So that's really powerful. And Lori, Anya went into the hills with her fae beings when humans came to her land, but she comes out to spread love and mischief. I love that you brought up Goddess Anya. She is an Irish goddess, and we will be invoking her next week in our summer solstice ceremony. So actually, Rachel, since you're on, if you would be so dear to find the link to the summer solstice ceremony and put it in the chat, I would love it. Thank you, Rachel. We will be invoking Goddess Anya because she is another character in Irish myth that is known as Queen of the Fae, just like you mentioned, Queen Maeve. And what I've learned about Anya is that as a goddess, as a deity, she really embodies women's sovereign sexuality, a lot like Maeve. There's like a lot of, connections there. And so she mated with a lot of mortals. She liked,
like, let's get it on.
yeah, she liked human men. And so from those pairings, she birthed a half human, half fairy race.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think
Maybe I'm a descendant of Anya.
I know,
right?
you got everything. Yeah.
I feel like maybe Anya is an ancient ancestor of me right now. half human, half fairy.
But, yeah,
I
no,
would
I
just love to hear. Sorry to interrupt. I'd just love to hear in the comments too. Is there? Thank you, darling. Thank you, Rachel. So the link to join us for the summer solstice is there in the comments. And yes, we will be invoking the energy of the Fae and Anya. But what I was going to say is I'd love to hear in the comments too, if you have felt a connection to a specific kind of fairy. Like if you love the flower fairies, or if you're like me and you're really into elves, or if maybe you really love gnomes, or if it's water sprites, or just for some fun. If anyone who's watching today, if you have a particular kinship to a specific kind of fae in the world, I would love to just hear that. And so for you, Lizzie Moonbeam, do you have a particular affinity?
I feel like everything you asked me, I'm like, with all of them. But no, I mean, it was also just one thing that came to mind. I didn't know that you liked elves. If anyone wants to invoke elves, they will bring cleverness. So if you want to have like all of the wit, like the elves are a good being to really get connected to. But I mean,
I do consider myself very witty.
Yes. So I was actually thinking like, oh, that makes sense. Flora's witty. That literally was my thought when you said that. But when I was younger, I think I was always drawn to dragons. So they were my big thing growing up. And it's funny, I just was clearing out like old stuff from when I was a kid. So many dragon books. I was like, wow. And it's funny because then when I got older, I like got out of that, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna read Shakespeare and Jane Austen, and I mean I love that, but it was like one of those things that I was like, man, my 10-year-old self had it going on, like my 10-year-old self knew everything. So I remember when I was like in 6th grade, we had to do a project on, it was like the book of our choice, and I picked The Hobbit, and we had to make a mask of the characters. And so I made a mask of the dragon Smog. And I remember it was like that kind of like that, like Elvis colored red, that like 50s bright red. Like I had that kind of material for the face, and I was just loving the fire energy. So I just remember though, like I just loved dragons from that young age, and I just felt such resonance, such kinship with them. And I love Dragonheart. You guys are, I think, realizing I'm a huge movie lover. I don't know if you guys if people are not familiar with Dragonheart. I feel like it's interesting. I think that the stories are all kind of very similar in that in the movie Dragonheart, the main character Draco is the last dragon.
Ah.
So it's very simple. It's different than the Merlin story, but there's this kind of element of it being the end of an era. The end of an era. It's and human beings really taking center stage.
Right.
And that seems to be the story we keep telling. But what I feel has to happen now is we need to start telling new stories. And instead of like in Lord of the Rings, where, you know, the elves, the different beings, they go to the undying land, we have to start consciously telling new stories, or we bring the fairies back. You know,
can we bring the undying land back to us, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And again, it's the power of words, power of words, power of energy, power of our intention. Because that's the thing of these beings, they never died. They're in the undying land for a reason, right? You know, it's just a matter of us reconnecting with them. And you know, that's why I brought up so many stories, you know, because I think stories are one way that, you know, even though our logical minds may say, oh, I don't believe in that, but then we'll go watch that movie, you know, then we'll watch Harry Potter. And in the fourth film, they're like the mermaids beneath the sea, you know, like
yes.
We like our soul, we're longing for that kind of like that. It's like a cosmic, mythic connection. And the reason we're longing for it is because we are also mythic beings. It's not like they're super magical and we're the non-magical. It's actually we're one and the same. We share the same magical heart.
Yes, we share the same magical heart. And this is a perfect segue. Well, actually, before I do that segue, remember the segue. Is that I just want to share. So we have not so much Fae, but the elementals. Okay, good, feeling that. We also have Mary saying, also all of them. Christine says elves, mermaids, and the flower fairies, unicorns, dragons, tree and mushroom fae for me. I love that, Lori. Dragons too. Dragon energy was not showing up for me until recently, but I think I have a dragon guardian making himself known now.
Ooh, that's very exciting.
Oh, and Lori, I can't listen to Puff the Magic Dragon without crying.
Oh my God, that's when you know it's for real.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I feel you, sister. So I love that. And so we have these inclinations and we have, you know, we have this attraction to some of these stories, but like you said, our mind can keep us into, but that's just a bit of silliness, you know, that's just a bit of childish fun. And so I would love to hear from you, and you've already been really speaking into this, but like, why do you think that this is important for us to cultivate our own connection to and to make the fairies and elementals alive for us right now?
I mean, I could have a serious, heavy answer about the state of the world, but
let's take this serious, heavy answer.
But I feel like my sense of the fairies coming through is that they want us just to laugh. The phrase that's coming through is divine laughter. It's like this is the moment. Watch like a romantic comedy. It's like this is the moment. You know, with all the heaviness in the world, we need more than ever to remember that we incarnated here to love life, to bask in every moment. And that's what the fairies, that's what the elementals, that's what they know. It's not about doing, it's about being. And I know this is something that people have, you've read this 100 times, but it really is just a fundamental truth. Like the fairies, the elementals, they don't understand why we are so busy. You know, like why we are running around doing all these things when we could just be out there in the sun, you know? And I feel we have forgotten what's important. You know, we have forgotten what's important. And what's important is just that, like, this little thing called life, you know, that we are in these bodies, that we get to have this kind of hero or heroine's journey. And just like really honoring the sacredness of that, the magic of that, you know? And so the fairies, the elementals, when we open to them, there's a constant, you know, flow of magic into our lives. And that's the kind of thing. So a lot of people will try to connect with a fairy or an elemental and they'll try once or twice and they'll be like, okay, I got a message, or I felt that, but then it's over. That's the end of the experience. But really, when you build a relationship with the Fae, it's a lifelong, it's a lifelong connecting that's happening. And like, for me, it was funny. I'll get the impulse to do certain things, like watch this movie, read this book, go outside. And it's life becomes this very, very magical, it becomes this experience of wonder.
Yes.
And there are teachers. It's funny because they're teaching us something that's so simple and, something that we should all know. And yet it takes them reminding us. And also they delight in us as well. So it's not just a one-way street.
No.
They actually want to interact with us. They think that we're actually capable of a lot more fun than we realize.
Definitely. Oh, thank you for that. That this is why it's important to bring more joy, delight, magic, and wonder into our lives again. And for me, what I would add in addition to that, for me, why I think that this is important is for us en masse, right, across the globe, for us all to finally remember that the earth is alive. Mm-hmm. That every plant, that even the stones, that of course all of the animals, and that we are an intricate part of the web of life, and that we are part of this. Everything is alive, and having a relationship with elementals, with fairies, with dragons, with mermaids adds in that appreciation that, well, we don't, let's just take our oceans, right? Like, if we actually really understood and believed, because it's true, that the ocean, the water is alive, and that we don't know who might be living down there, right? Like the mer folk, we wouldn't be treating our oceans the way that we do. But because we think that this earth is like this inanimate, I don't know what we think. Like, I honestly look around, I'm like, what are people thinking? So really that the earth is alive. And for me, I've always really connected with the Fae through nature, through like being in trees, sitting in tall grass and being with the flowers. And often it's when I'm still, not always, but it's often when I'm still and I'm quiet enough I really feel that there's a presence. And whether or not I'm actually feeling the presence of something, I'm feeling the presence of life all mm-hmm. around me, right? So that would be my tips for how to connect with Fae. I know you've shared that one of your favorite ways to connect is through stories and through film. Mm-hmm. Do you have any other tips on how people can connect and bring in the energy of Fae?
Well, I think it depends what kind of beings you're trying to connect with. So when I first kind of opened up as an adult, I was in County Clare in Ireland. Nice. For about 3 weeks. And it was funny because the people there were telling stories like, don't stay out at late too night. Like, wow, can't speak. Don't stay out at night too late, because they're like, the fairies in the fields are going to get you. And I was like, oh my God. And it was funny because I could feel it. I could feel the presence. I didn't think they were actually going to get me, but I was actually conscious of their presence. Mm. And so I was looking up, I was like, I want to talk to you. I was looking up this probably about 7 years ago. I was thinking that I wanted to connect with beings from County Clare. And I found there was a fairy queen from County Clare. And I was like, of course, I want to connect with her. And so she was, and so what I was kind of doing, which it's funny, I have tips for this now, but I didn't realize that sometimes it's not always a good idea to go up with like the fairy queens unless you're more experienced.
You're like, I'm gonna take on the queen.
I know, right? And it was like, hi. And then it was like, and the first time was very scary because I couldn't, like, I felt my consciousness go there and I couldn't move. I literally, and I knew I was like, okay, I'm technically fine. But I was like, I'm actually here, because I could not move my physical body. And I was like, I gotta get back. got to get back. And so the next time I realized I had to go in with a guide. So again, the power of words. So I called in, I said, I want a guide to take me through fairy and to really protect me, when I'm going to these enchanted realms. So that's a tip, is again, the power of your words. Call in the exact kind of guide that you want. And I always say, like, a guide of the highest light, love, and vibration, and that way. And I'm also saying my intention for this experience, is like, I will, in terms like this, at the first time with my body was kind of scary. It will be a joyful, easy, fun experience, meeting and connecting with these fairy beings. And the second time I went, I got to actually talk to her, and because like I wasn't scared, I wasn't like freaked out anymore. And she put an image in my head of a cat, and I was like, what does this mean? Because I was so excited that I could feel her presence, this fairy queen from County Clare in Ireland. And I suddenly was like, I don't know what to do with this. And I remembered, like, I'm a storyteller. I'm like bardess. And I started telling her a story from when I was a little kid, like my favorite story with one of my pets growing up. And I could feel her leaning in, like, oh, tell me more. And I was like, oh my God. And so I started just telling her I wasn't just like thinking of stories. I literally was like telepathically and actually verbally telling stories, because that was me kind of embodying that energy of the bard. Because 1,000 years ago, the bards were going from kingdom to kingdom, telling their stories, to different kings and queens. We don't see that very often nowadays. But for the fairy kings and queens, that never has gone out of style. So if you are interacting with, a fairy king, fairy queen, or any kind of fairy being, and you're like, oh shit, I don't know what to say, tell them a story. Tell them a wonderful story. And remember, you're here to delight them. Because you delight them, they will want to in turn delight you. And the reason I brought that up is because this was earlier in my journey, and usually you're kind of supposed to go in with an offering for them. Yeah. And I realized that, when I was in the middle of this experience, and it was, what can I offer? And I thought, of course, I'll offer a story. So people don't realize that you can offer a story, you can offer a beautiful memory, you can offer a beautiful feeling. And that's just starting the conversation.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Lizzie Moonbeam. Such great tips. One, ask to have a guide join you, a guide of the highest love, light, and vibration, and clearly state your intention of why you want to connect with this being, whether it's a dragon guide, a mermaid guide, a fairy queen. I love those tips. And if you ever feel at a loss of what to say, tell them a story. That is so great. Lori, when did humanity move from living in harmony with Gaia to feeling like they needed to conquer her? I believe this was the disconnect. Well, it really only happened about 6,000 years ago, maybe 10,000 years ago. It was at the end of the last ice age, really. And I believe that initially that impulse wasn't so much about conquering, but it really was about, hey, we're figuring out this agriculture thing. Hey, we can stop being nomadic and we could actually settle and grow. And so, I don't necessarily believe that the original kind of impulse was all that negative, but yeah, it hasn't been that long when we look at the big picture of humanity's history. Great comment though, Lori. I do agree with you. So I want to share one of my stories that when I saw an interdimensional elf. And yes, there were some psychedelics involved, but that doesn't mean that it was any less real. In fact, I'm sure it gave me eyes to see. So this was years and years ago. I was with my former boyfriend, and it was just us in the woods. And this elf suddenly just like appeared before me, and it was like, yeah, ears like this and very kind of angular but moving, and then just like locked eyes with me. And I stopped and I was like, do you see that? Because I was like, and then yeah, my boyfriend was like, no, what? I'm like, he's right in front of us. And it was, you know, like I rarely tell this story because I fear of being discredited, like, oh, that was just a hallucination. But it was not a hallucination. There was like an energy that was so in my body, and he was just there for like a few moments, and then he like kind of like threw down like kind of like a smoke bomb, and it went and then he disappeared, and I was like, whoa.
Ooh.
But the even trippier thing about that experience was that 6 months later, I happened to see one of Alex Gray's pieces of art entitled Cosmic Elf. And it was a portrait of the elf that I saw.
Oh my God. Oh my God. That is amazing. Oh, wow.
So, if you don't know Alex Gray, he's a visionary artist. So Cosmic Elf, I was like, I met that guy. I met that guy. Oh.
No, I'm just, I definitely believe what you saw, because I feel like psychedelics, it's not just they open your third eye, but it's there's a moving between the realms. I feel like there's a reason that, like, you know, shamans for so many centuries, like it wasn't to disconnect. It was to go, I feel like, even deeper with our understanding of the universe. And I actually believe that, you know, learning about fairies and elementals is actually an essential part of our shamanic education. So like, so that's the thing, is I absolutely believe what you saw. And I feel like even though, like, you know, your ex-boyfriend couldn't see it, it's, you had eyes to see, because, you know, he didn't see it. Like it wasn't, you know, the substance, it was the fact that you were attuned on a deep soul level to that kind of being. There was a frequency resonance. Yeah. And I feel like that's why he could appear to you.
Right. So. That's exactly right. And so as we begin to close this conversation today, such a wonderful Creatrix conversation with you today, Lizzie Moonbeam, but I just really want to invite that, even like, because we were speaking about this before we hit record, about bringing in, like you said, like attuning, being in resonance with their energy is really important for us to have that. So even we were talking about the colors that we wore today, right? That you heard the fairies say, wear bright colors, right? You said you heard that? Yeah. And I wore my ears today, and I, you know, I have my wand. Like I'm intentionally trying to be a frequency match, right? By bringing in the energy, and you can share more about that too.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to see. I was like, I'm going to show everyone like my eye makeup.
Oh yeah, I have my Elven star necklace too, like from Arwen of Lord of the Rings, that I wore at my wedding. Like it's my Elven star necklace.
Oh my God, it's gorgeous. No, I had to have braids in my hair. I had to do like super intense. I don't know if you guys can see the eye makeup, because if I close my eyes, I can't see anything. But no, but I was very much guided. You know, I feel like to kind of like the phrase I'm hearing is like kind of show up in all your glory. You know, like, and show up being the essence, the energy of magic, of wonder, of fun, of play. And, you know, I feel like that's because the fairies, you know, it's me and Flora talking, but the fairies, the elementals, are informing this conversation, you know, like, and I feel like their frequencies are coming through us. And so I feel like that's kind of the invitation, is in all moments of your life, like, you know, kind of like, where are you not showing up like a fairy king or a fairy queen? Think about that. You know, like you woke up and you said, you know, today I'm fully honoring myself as fairy queen. You know, like, what would your life be like?
Or dragon queen, or mermaid queen, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And a note, by the way, like, so I think a lot of us actually have, if you have a car, you have like a metal dragon that is the guardian. It's like the elemental of your car. I'm not kidding. So on planes, there are metal dragons that are like the guardian. So all these different things, we have household elementals that are wanting us to acknowledge them. And so it's waking up to this magical world that you're already living in.
Yes, and waking up to this magical world that we are living in. Thank you.
Yes. And so that's why you get to be the dragon king, the dragon queen, the fairy queen, you know. And I think when you create from that frequency, you know, like when you make your life, you know, with that intention, all the fairies, all the elementals are going to be so drawn to you, and you will see magic showing up in the most unexpected places.
Yeah.
I feel like that's their promise to you. You know, it's not even just them, it's like life's promise to you. And just they remember that your life is meant to be full of joy. That's I think the big message.
Beautiful. And it's so in alignment with the archetype, the face of the goddess that we are in right now in She Spirals, which is the muse. And She Spirals is the mystery school of Earth Song Temple. So even the energies, the ripple effects, the butterfly wing sparkles are being felt in this wider community of Awaken the Goddess Within. And so this has been just a delight to have this Creatrix conversation with you and to bring the muse energy more forward. And yeah, and thank you. You continually say that they want us to live a life filled with joy, filled with magic. Before we close, can you share what your website is or how people can connect with you? And you were also sharing that you've created a guided meditation.
Yes. So my website is magical-storytelling.com. So I can tell you more about that, but I'm more guided to tell you about the meditation. So the meditation came to me yesterday in the nick of time. So it is an adventure to an enchanted fairy forest. And that's also another word I wanted to bring up before we close. I feel like the fairies, they're wanting us to wake up to the fact that it's not just life is supposed to be joy, but life is adventure. And so this is it's like a 15-minute guided meditation to an enchanted forest where you will go on an adventure with the fairies and with the other elementals. So my team is still putting that together, but I will put the link somewhere, like I guess underneath the video when it's put.
Please do. And if you want to be pinged when Lizzie Moonbeam has this, then say meditation please in the comments right now. Meditation please. Meditation please. You can just put that in because then we'll make sure that you get it. Yeah, wonderful. Well, I feel like the fairy stories, the fairy tales have been told today. That the fairies are smiling and they're being acknowledged and remembered. And thank you, everyone. I love how interactive this talk was today. Lots of they're all rolling in. Meditation, please. Meditation, please. Beautiful. Thank you to everyone who have tuned in live. Everyone who's watching the replay. Thank you, Lizzie Moonbeam. This was just a wonderful discussion today, and love to find a soul sister, a fairy soul sister in you.
Yes, I had so much fun, and I just want to say thank you to the audience too. I had fun hearing all your fairy encounters. You know, like especially the one who I think met the fairy in, I don't know if it was Switzerland. Yeah. But anytime someone sees a fairy, I feel like it's a special blessing.
Oh yeah, and I don't think that I actually closed that story. That I did see that she said it was in an ancient tree, and of course it is that ancient tree portal. So I love that. Yeah, absolutely love that. All right, everyone. So blowing you kisses and have a beautiful rest of your day. Thank you for joining in for this Creatrix Conversations. Bye now.